what's up? Sanisa, Super Bad Estrada here, and I just want to give a huge special shout out to the relay. Thank you so much for all of the continuous support, and thank you for all of the support during and after and before every single fight.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Ramla Ali versus Beck Connolly. Let's talk about the fight. I think that Ramla very quickly displayed why there's so much buzz around her in spite of her now only being 2-0. Ahead of this fight, she was 1-0, only had one professional contest. I think she very quickly put on display what it is about her that is generating all of this excitement. She faced the very seasoned, experienced Beck Connolly, tough fighter, who in spots during this fight I thought was going to get stopped as Ramla was teeing off after a very quiet feel-out first round. In the second round, Ramla found her range, started landing a lot of hard shots.
And Beck didn't make it easy on herself.
The very stubborn, very insistent Beck Connolly, who insisted on coming forward in spite of coming under heavy fire.
She didn't make herself hard to hit at all.
She was in there with a very well-schooled boxer in Ramla Ali, who knows how to negotiate distance behind her lead hand, her jab hand.
Excellent.
Exhibited a very good jab and very good movement, staying out of striking distance, Beck Connolly, whilst at the same time landing punches of her own.
Excellent.
I think the only drawback, the only aspect of Ramla's game that needs a bit working on is moving that head, keeping it off the line.
Beck Connolly wasn't able to exploit this.
Beck wasn't able to capitalize off of this very slight flaw in Ramla Ali's game, which I don't really even view as a flaw at all, because lest we forget, context is key. Ramla Ali only has 2 professional fights. She's still transitioning from an amateur style to a pro style.
It's not like Ramla got hit with punches she didn't need to get hit with.
From the opening bell to the final bell, Ramla Ali was in control of all the real estate, in control of all the action. Ramla Ali was the clear-cut ring general here.
And I like what I saw.
I see what the buzz is about. I look forward to seeing more from Ramla Ali. Congratulations to her for advancing to a professional record of 2-0. We then come to the Scotney versus Ali-Ganglof fight, a fight that I told you guys ahead of the fight seemed like more of a contest to me than Ali versus Connolly. The very game, very aggressive Ali-Ganglof, who I told you.
She's a tough girl.
But Ali Scotney would decision her. I want to say that Ali Scotney retains that initial wow factor that we saw in the Beck Connolly fight, which was Ali's first professional fight. It's amazing how well she managed the space and the real estate
Whilst on the go.
whilst having to fight on the fly, as Ali-Ganglof exhibited a good chin. She took a lot of hard shots whilst coming through that front door, came under heavy fire whilst coming forward, but she was never deterred.
She was crowding Ali Scotney.
Following her around that ring and attempting to get within striking distance of the very nimble, very fleet of foot Ali Scotney, who was not only using her mobility, her movement to manage Ali-Ganglof's aggression, but landing shots, accurate whilst fighting on the fly, deadly accurate. We saw some good left hooks, some good uppercuts. We saw all kinds of great punches from Ali Scotney, and the wow factor comes from her doing this while she's on the fly, while she's on the go. If Ali-Ganglof managed to make this a contest in any way, it's because she was able to take a lot of hard shots and continuously come forward, forcing Ali Scotney to manage the distance, manage the real estate. It's like Ali-Ganglof did a good job of closing the gap on Ellie, but once she got there, she didn't know what to do.
She was smothering her own work.
Being so focused on getting close to Ellie that once she actually did, she didn't know what to do.
Whereas Ellie did.
Ellie's movement, her punch selection in the pocket, deep in the pocket, with a very aggressive mid-range to inside puncher, Ali-Ganglof was very impressive because she was able to fight on the fly and manage the space whilst at the same time getting off shots, getting off punches. This was a very good learning fight for Ali Scotney because she was in there with a girl that didn't come to lay down, that was really going to try to win.
As best as she could.
And what makes it impressive is oftentimes when you get these standout amateurs, these blue chip prospects like Ali Scotney, you put a pressure fighter in front of them, and they start to come apart at the seams.
Pressure bust pipes.
The pressure of having someone who's very aggressive in front of you, who's not going to crumble off the first hard shot that lands. They're not going to get away. They're going to stay on top of you. They're going to stay with you, and you're tasked with doing the business.
Doing the job.
All things considered, I think Ali Scotney handled Ali-Ganglof's pressure well, still was the more effective boxer and the clear-cut winner.
Saw some slight stamina issues.
What might have been some slight stamina issues from Scotney as this fight wore on towards the end of it. And I don't read too much into that because this was only
her second fight.
Her second professional fight, you understand. There's obviously work needs doing and experiences that need to be had. So even if Ali did slow down a bit as this fight wore on, that's an experience that she needs to have. That's going to happen. Chalk it up to growing pains. But all things considered, Ali was the clear-cut winner. This fight never got away from her, and it was another wow factor performance from
Catford's own Ellie Scotney.
We then come to the main event of that same card, the cruiserweight title fight for the vacant WBO title, what was then the vacant WBO title, between Lawrence Okolie and Scotney-Glowacki. And this fight very much lived up to my expectations.
Sensational.
Okolie's performance against Jaszewski left a lasting impression on me because he was finally starting to use his physical dimensions in the most effective way possible. And I noticed that, well, now he's got Shane McGuigan in his corner, and that's likely where that change is coming from. In this fight, with Scotney-Glowacki, who for all counts was the more experienced professional boxer, Lawrence Okolie not only lived up to my expectations, he exceeded them because this fight never got away from him.
He used his height and he used his reach.
Which makes him a very hard target. A very hard target, albeit a very big target, but a hard target nonetheless, as the man opposite the ring is then tossed with getting close enough to Lawrence to start landing punches, and Scotney-Glowacki could not do this. It's a situation to where you're already going to have a hell of a hard time getting close to Lawrence because of how much he's employing his lead hand, and even if you manage to slip, bob, and weave your way
around the jab,
past the jab, all Lawrence has got to do is take a half step back to get out of range, to get out of striking distance.
So you're back in the shed.
You're back on the outside, trying to work your way in, within the line of fire of the very statuesque Lawrence Okolie.
You're within the line of fire, but he's not within yours.
Because of his very statuesque frame and because of his wingspan, he doesn't need to be right up on you to touch you. For the longest time, this was a problem with Lawrence. You know, he's so close to these guys when he doesn't have to be, but he's corrected that problem.
No more clinch fests.
There's a time and a place for clinching. There's a time and a place for tying a guy up. That if the guy manages to make his way past the jab and you didn't take that half step back so he's right up on you, you can tie him up to frustrate him, tie him up to neutralize and thereby smother his work. You can do this.
You can.
So that's not saying that there isn't an effective use for clinching. There is. It's just that with Lawrence, you know, before...
He's just doing that way too much.
But he has since corrected that problem. His last two fights, the Jaszewski fight, last night's Glowacki fight, you saw effective use of the lead hand to manage the distance, manage the space, keep the other guy at bay.
Outside.
Keep him in front of you.
Look to set up the big right hand.
And watching the fight, I felt that really it was only a matter of time before Glowacki ate a big right hand because he had almost no chance of winning this fight fighting from the outside. He's subject to Lawrence Okolie's height, his reach, and his jab from the outside, so at some point, he's going to have to take a chance.
He's going to have to open up.
He's going to have to risk something, and when he does, Lawrence is going to connect. Lawrence is going to put him down and put him out, because not only is Lawrence Okolie a very strong puncher with a dynamite right hand, but I didn't feel that Christoph takes the best punch. I didn't feel that Christoph has best chin, takes the best shot.
And that's what we saw.
By the time the sixth rolled around, I had it 5 rounds to 0, 5 rounds to zip in favor of Lawrence Okolie, who very effectively managed the distance, managed the space. And so long as he keeps fighting like this, he's going to be a tough out. He's going to be a real hard target for a lot of guys in the cruiserweight division. That's Lunga Makabu, that's Arslan Gulamarian, and even Mayris Briedis to some effect. This was Lawrence's 16th professional fight. A huge step up in competition from the kind of guys that he'd been fighting so far. And he passed this test with flying colors.
He called out Mayris Briedis.
He called out Richard Dwyer.
I don't actually think he's going to be fighting Richard Dwyer in his very next fight, or Mayris Briedis for that matter. Rest assured, that was a career-best performance from Lawrence Okolie. He showed a lot of eliticism in that fight, but I think that there's more work needs doing before he's actually ready for Mayris Briedis, though I like his ambition. I like that he wants the fight. I like that he believes he can win. I like that bit of it, but I don't think they're going to put him in that situation just yet. I think the logical choice for a unification match when it comes to Lawrence, if one is to take place in his very next fight, would have to be either Lunga Makabu, the WBC Cruiserweight Champion, or Arslan Gulamarian. Cruiserweight Division's WBA champion. I think those are more logical choices. Moreover, I think those are more plausible choices for Lawrence Okolie's next fight if he is to unify. Congratulations to him for living up to my expectations and landing that dynamite right hand that put Glowacki to bed for the rest of the night. Over there in the East, in Russia, Artur Beterbiev, the unified light heavyweight champion, was in action against his mandatory challenger, Adam Deines. And you know, maybe the fight took longer to finish, took longer to close than most would have expected from Artur, who is often categorized as the biggest puncher in the entire light heavyweight division, one of the most destructive punchers in the entire sport of boxing. That to some, you know, they might have been watching this thing and they're thinking to themselves, you know, when is he going to close the show? Because it does seem like he's playing with this guy.
Why is this taking so long?
He managed to stop Adam Deines in the 10th round after having dropped Adam 2 times throughout the course of this match. I want to say that I don't read too much into this performance because Artur Beterbiev had been out for a very long time, approximately 519 days since the Alexander Gvozdyk fight. It's well over a year. We talked about Artur's inactivity, how he just seemed like a victim of circumstance, that for one reason or another, there was always something keeping him out of action, out of the ring, and that's going to develop into ring rust, you know, and that's what he shook off yesterday in Russia. That's what that was. He needed those rounds.
Power's still there.
That first knockdown wasn't even off a clean shot. He grazed Adam and dropped him with a punch. Power's still there, and the patented pressure of Artur Beterbiev, who comes forward in that high guard, catching shots on the gloves, waiting to get close enough to a guy to start unloading, start dropping bombs. Short punches on the inside.
You know, the fight never got away from him.
That, for the most part, was a dominant showing for Artur. He just had to work for it for a little while longer than you would have expected given his reputation. But all things considered, you can't compare that performance. You can't really liken it to Thurman versus Lopez, per se. Keith Thurman, who's yet another fighter who oftentimes spends too much time away from the ring. You know, Artur was shaking off the cobwebs. He was shaking off the ring rust. He had been out for a while. But comparatively, Artur looked a lot better coming off of his inactivity than, say, Keith Thurman did coming off of his inactivity. I mean, that's why you can't read too much into it. I will say that his age is troubling, that Artur, he is 36 years old. He's not getting any younger. And they are talking about matching him this year against the winner of Smith Jr. versus Maxim Vlasov. I think Joe's going to win that fight. And I think that Joe makes for a hard fight for Artur, win or lose. But that has a lot to do with Joe, you know, not just Artur's age, not just his inactivity and all of that, but because Joe's a durable guy who packs a big punch, and he'll come after you. He'll keep on coming. 2 pressure guys, like Joe Smith Jr. and Artur Beterbiev, well, that makes for a big hospital bill.
Yeah, it does.
Maintain my original position that I think Artur delivers a bigger punch than Joe, but I think Joe takes a better punch than Artur. And it's anybody's guess what's going to happen if and when those 2 guys fight. Joe's got to make it past Maxim first. It's not a foregone conclusion that he beats Maxim, though I do think Joe Smith Jr. is the favorite to win.
Let's hope he makes it through it.
Let's hope we get Beterbiev versus Smith Jr. towards the end of the year. Congratulations to Artur for a successful title defense of his WBC and IBF world titles. We then come to the Golden Boy Promotions card, which was the final card here of the night, here stateside. The Senicia Estrada versus Annabelle Ortiz WBA minimum weight title fight. And Senicia Estrada did not fail to impress. I mean, this was an entertaining fight from start to finish. You guys know how I felt about the fight, that Senicia was simply too fast, too furious, too aggressive, too eager to make a statement for the reigning champion, Annabelle Ortiz, and that's what we saw. She couldn't contend with Senicia's hand speed or combinations, the switch hitting from orthodox to southpaw throughout the entirety of the fight.
The knockdown off that massive right hand.
And what resonates with me the most post-fight is that this wasn't just a good advertisement for Senicia Estrada as an individual fighter, but a good advertisement for the sport of women's boxing overall, because this was the co-main event to the main event. This was the fight right before the Virgil Ortiz-Maurice-Hooker fight, and a lot of people got to see what Senicia Estrada is capable of, that she's a crowd pleaser, and she's not alone. There's a lot of fighters that are just as entertaining. Moreover, this was Senicia's night.
This was her moment in the limelight.
She fully capitalized on it. She didn't stop Annabelle the way I thought she would, but she came very close. A lot of credit has to go to Annabelle Ortiz for finishing this fight on her feet and going the distance, because she took a lot of hard shots.
This fight never got away from Senicia.
This really was her fight to win. And with that, the question then becomes, what's next for Senicia after having been so dominant against the longest reigning champion in the sport of women's boxing? You know, Annabelle Ortiz was world champion for 8 fucking years. And look at what Senicia did to her. The question now becomes, who's gonna want to step in there with Senicia after a performance like that? It's Tada, Tina Ruprecht, Yokastavalle. They might seek refuge with each other and unify with each other before so deciding to sneeze in Senicia Estrada's direction. She's a hot potato. She is the most dangerous fighter. Now the most dangerous champion, anywhere from 105, 108 to 112 pounds.
Who the fuck's gonna want to fight her now?
In the sport of boxing, there is such a thing as being too good for your own good. And I think that a lot of girls biting their fucking nails based on how Senicia Estrada performed last night.
Congratulations to her.
I think this heralds the beginning of very big things for Senicia Estrada. Though securing opponents, it's going to be difficult. It really is. But she's the show! Anywhere at 105, 108, or 112 pounds. Finally, we come to the main event of that same card. The welterweight WBO eliminator between Virgil Ortiz and Maurice Hooker. Maurice Hooker, who lived up to my expectations in a lot of ways. You know, he enlisted the aid of Brian Bomac McIntyre very recently, who trains Jamel Herring, who trains Terrence Crawford. For the most part, I actually think Maurice Hooker boxed very well against the very game, very strong, physically imposing Virgil Ortiz, who got a lot of hard shots in the exchange. Got through with a lot of big punches.
They both did.
Maurice as well. He had his moments.
They both did.
Mighty Mo attempting to fight long range, fight long distance, straightening out his shots, moving around that ring to keep the oncoming Virgil Ortiz on the outside. Virgil didn't make it easy for him.
Mighty Mo was letting his hands go.
So was Virgil. Big right hands upstairs, big hooks downstairs to Maurice Hooker's midsection. Virgil Ortiz, he didn't abandon the body.
No, he didn't.
Made quite a few investments into the body punching.
Fight was thoroughly entertaining.
Finished in under 7 rounds. Maurice Hooker appears to have hurt his hand, and that caused the fight to come to a close. He couldn't recover from that. I think that Maurice made the right decision, because had he chosen to fight on, had he chosen to fight injured, can you imagine the kind of punishment that he would have sustained? The kind of punishment that shaves years off a fighter's career. Ultimately, I think that Maurice, deciding to stop after having injured his hand, made the right decision, made the right call. I think that there are plenty of fights out there for both Virgil and Maurice. Virgil wants Terrence Crawford. We talked about that in the past. We talked about that in previous videos, and we're going to talk about what we can expect to happen next, because I'm not convinced the people over there at Golden Boy are going to throw caution to the wind and make that fight in a jiffy, make that fight in a timely fashion. Virgil's got a high ceiling, a lot of upside, a lot of promise, great kid, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to put him in that situation just yet, even though he might want to be in that situation. It was a great night of boxing. Overall, a great card from Golden Boy Promotions from start to finish.